Perfect. So today we're going to be taking a closer look at some of the most common folk deities in the Chinese pantheon and discussing their symbolic significance. It's important to note, however, that Chinese folk religion isn't one homogenized religion. And if you ever came to our seminar on the history of religion, which I am going to repeat in the future, I think it's in the plan for either September or October, you'll know that Chinese folk religion is more of an umbrella term that's used to describe a host of diverse religious practices and beliefs that span the entirety of China and have kind of been loosely brought together but have no actual connection. It's just sort of a catch-all term for anything that doesn't fit into Buddhism or Taoism or any of the other sort of standardized religions. For this reason, some of the folk deities we're going to talk about today do come from other established religions, such as Buddhism and Taoism, but their notoriety is such that they are worshipped throughout China, even outside of these religions and their institutions. Most of the deities I'll be talking about today, however, have no place in any specific religion and are instead derived from Chinese mythology. They have been worshipped for time immemorial, so it's impossible to really pin down precisely which religion they came from. In some instances, they are the source of their own religion, since many of these deities are localized to a particular area where their skill set is particularly relevant. So, for example, the cult of Mazu in Fujian province exclusively worships a sea goddess named Mazu, because Fujian province is on the southeastern coast, and many of its residents were once fishermen, hence why you would want to worship a sea goddess. So during the first half of the seminar, I'll be focusing on arguably the two most important deities in the Chinese pantheon. And then in the second half, I'll take a look at some of the smaller yet no less significant deities that do enjoy popularity throughout China and sort of notoriety. So they're really important just in terms of, for example, funeral rites and the Spring Festival. So to get started, this image is from the Baiyuan, or White Cloud Temple in Beijing, which is a Taoist temple. And the painting depicts a deity known as the Jade Emperor. From artwork and literature to architecture and sculpture, the Jade Emperor is prolific throughout China, since he, of course, ranks as the highest deity in the Chinese folk pantheon. For this reason, he is known by the alternate names of Tiangong, or the Heavenly Father, Yuhua Xiangdi, or the highest emperor of Jade, and also Yu Huang Dadi, the great Jade Emperor, although most commonly he's known as Yu Huang, Yu meaning Jade, Huang meaning emperor. Within Taoism, however, he is demoted to serving as the assistant to Yuanshi Tianzun, who is one of the three sort of pure ones, so the three highest deities within Taoism that serve as the sort of highest, I guess, visualizations, like they're actual physical deities, but they do rank below the Tao itself, which is the highest sort of deity, which is kind of like an amorphous, vaguely primordial thing within Taoism. So you've got the Tao at the top, and then these three pure ones underneath, who are actual deities that are sort of realized in physical form. Within Chinese Buddhism, he maintains his high rank, as he is often equated with the deity Sakra, who is the ruler of the heavenly realm. So not quite on the same level as Buddha, but still pretty high up. The amount of stories revolving around or involving the Jade Emperor within Chinese mythology are too numerous to mention here. So I want to instead focus on his origin story and what he means to the Chinese people today. What may surprise you, however, is that most of China's high-ranking folk deities started their lives as real people who achieved immortality in life and then ascended to the heavens in some way, with the Jade Emperor being no different from this. Both origin stories attributed to the Jade Emperor have him starting out as a mortal man. In the first and arguably most popular iteration of the legend, he starts off life as a minor soldier named Zhang Denglai during the Zhou dynasty, so around about 1045 to 256 BC, right as the dynasty is first starting out. During the ensuing civil war between the ruling Shang dynasty, Zhang Denglai is killed along with many of his fellow soldiers. Once they arrive in the afterlife, they are all waiting together at what is known as the Terrace of Canonization, which sounds great, to receive their posthumous rewards, which are all dependent on how much they achieved or how moral they were in life. Jiang Ziya, one of the most famous, brave, strategic military commanders who led the rebel forces, is the one responsible for giving out these rewards. Now, Jiang Ziya goes through all of the different titles and fills up all of the positions in the celestial hierarchy. but ends up leaving Jiang Donglai out. In the end, it is only himself and Jiang Donglai who do not have positions, and there is only one position remaining, the highest office of the Jade Emperor, which Jiang Ziya was planning on reserving for himself. When he came to the final post, Jiang Ziya decided to take a pause, as was customary etiquette at the time, to show humility. In the process, however, he said the phrase, "wait a second," which in Chinese is "deng lai" in Chinese. So you can imagine how that the man I was talking about. Seeing an opportunity to snatch at power, Jiang Donglai pretended he had misheard Jiang Ziya say his name, so he stepped forward, Jiang Ziya for bestowing such a high honor onto him. Jiang Ziya was a man of principle and couldn't bear the thought of admitting his mistake, so the title of Jade Emperor and ruler of the heavens was thus given to Jiang Donglai. The Taoist account of his origins, however, paint a completely different picture of the man, thankfully, because that one isn't so great. According to this account, the Jade Emperor was originally the crown prince of a mythical nation known as the Kingdom of Pure Felicity and Majestic Heavenly Lights and Ornaments. A really, really long name. While she was pregnant, his mother supposedly had a vision of Lao Zi, and when he was born, he emitted a numinous light that supposedly covered the entire kingdom, which was hopefully bigger than its name. As you might expect, he was a child prodigy who was said to be as kind as he was intelligent. He devoted much of his early life to helping the neediest members of society and also showed the utmost respect for all living beings, including plants and animals. When his father died, he ascended to the throne and his kingdom enjoyed an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity. Once his kingdom was in order, the emperor decided he wanted to embark on a journey of self-discovery. Leaving his ministers in charge of his kingdom, he traveled to the bright and fragrant cliff in order to cultivate the Tao. After a whopping, supposedly, I don't even know how to read this out, 2,020,000, I think it's 226,008, it's like 2 million years, some 2 million years of self-cultivation. I put the number down, I can't actually read it, but it's around about 2.5 million years of self-cultivation. He supposedly attained a state known as golden immortality. It took another 100 million years of cultivation, however, before he finally became the Jade Emperor. But how did he go on to become the ruler of the heavens? How was he able to subjugate so many other powerful deities? Well, it all goes back to his experiences as a mortal ruler. You see, during the dawn of time, the earth wasn't a particularly pleasant place to live for humans. It was riddled with monstrous beasts and rabid demons, who regularly menaced, kidnapped, and killed people. On top of that, there weren't many deities in heaven during this time, and none of them were particularly powerful, so they afforded little protection to their worshippers. As a mortal man, the Jade Emperor realized that he could only ease the suffering of man, but his powers weren't great enough to purge the land of monsters and demons. This was his main motivation behind traveling to the cliff to cultivate his talents. During this time, he passed through 3,200 trials, a number I can actually read, with each one making him stronger. It was through this process of self-refinement that he ended up earning his place at the top of the pantheon, as opposed to the other origin story that presents him as being simply opportunistic and kind of just cheeky as opposed to talented. Although he carries untold importance now as one of the most well-known folk deities in China, it wasn't always this way. Historical evidence indicates that he was either totally unknown or a relatively minor deity right up until the Tang Dynasty, so about 618 to 907, the second golden age in Chinese history, which was when his status within the Taoist pantheon was raised. Even though he is technically meant to be the attendant of Yuanshi Tianzun within Taoism, many Taoist worshippers began regarding him as the supreme deity of the religion, with writers and poets frequently portraying him as such. This is how he largely crossed over into folk religion, where he was depicted as the celestial counterpart to the real emperor on earth and sort of his spiritual father. A pivotal moment for the Jade Emperor came during the Song dynasty, when he was included among the list of pre-approved deities that would receive sacrifices from the imperial court. During the reign of Emperor Huizong of Song, he was even honored with the title Hao Tianyu Shang Shangdi, or the Jade Emperor, High Ancestor of the Bright Heavens. What a great name. He lost his status as a state deity when the Song dynasty ended, but by then his popularity as both a Taoist and folk deity had been firmly cemented. At some point in his history, he was even given the Buddhist title of 清净自然觉望入来, or Tathgata, the pure king of the natural enlightenment, which serves as an ideal example of how different religions often absorbed popular deities from other pantheons to kind of legitimate themselves. His status as the celestial counterpart of the real-life emperor, however, often left him open to criticism. For example, in the classical Ming Dynasty novel Journey to the West by Wu Cheng'en, and if you haven't read it, please do, it's amazing. There's a great translation by Arthur Waley called Monkey, which is a Penguin classic, which is kind of a abridged version of it, but it's fantastic in English, so definitely get it if you can. So within Journey to the West, the Jade Emperor is presented as the foil to the Monkey King Sun Wukong. While Sun Wukong is jealous, bitter, impatient, and controlled by his emotions, the Jade Emperor is kind, compassionate, patient, and takes a logical approach to problems. Now, this may seem like quite a positive representation, but the Jade Emperor is portrayed throughout the novel as an incompetent ruler who spends much of his time issuing bureaucratic orders that fail to stop Sun Wukong, a powerful challenger to the established order. This demonstrates that, although he may be the supreme ruler of heaven, his power was not immutable, which necessitated the existence of other deities, unlike in Christianity, for example. Nowadays, worship of the Jade Emperor continues to play an important role in people's lives, particularly during the Spring Festival period. First of all, it is the Jade Emperor who sends the kitchen god to people's homes so that he can make a report on the family. The kitchen god lives in their home for the entire year, writes up his findings, and then returns to the heavens during the Spring Festival period to report back to the Jade Emperor on how they've been doing. Depending on the kitchen god's report, the Jade Emperor will either reward the family for their good deeds or punish them appropriately in the coming year. The ninth day of the first lunar month, which is still part of the Spring Festival celebration, is the Jade Emperor's birthday. So rituals and offerings in his honor often take place within Taoist temples. Now, while the Jade Emperor didn't become popular until later in his life, the next deity I'm going to talk about has been a staple part of Chinese mythology since ancient times. And it may surprise you because it is, in fact, not a man, it is a woman. Yes, girl power. So this painting here is from an illustrated copy of the Shanhai Jing, or the Classic of Mountains and Seas. And it depicts a popular female deity known as the Queen Mother of the West. For the sake of brevity, I'll be referring to her from now on as Shiwang W, because Queen Mother of the West is a bit of a mouthful. So in Chinese, Xi means west, Wang actually means king or ruler, and then Mu means mother, Shiwang W, the Queen Mother of the West. The first mention of Shiwang W dates all the way back to the oracle bone inscriptions made during the Shang dynasty, which means she ranks among the oldest deities in Chinese history. One such inscription reads, and I quote, "Crack making on the 9th day, we divined. If we make offering to the Eastern Mother and the Western Mother, there will be approval." This indicates that Shiwang W was a primordial deity who was believed to live physically in the West. What makes the early depictions of Shiwang W so fascinating is how feral she is. In the Classic of Mountains and Seas, which was written during the Zhou dynasty, so about 1042 to 256 BC, she is depicted as a ferocious, almost beast-like goddess with the teeth of a tiger, which ties in with the association between the West and tigers that would pervade throughout Chinese mythology. According to this account, she also has the tail of a leopard, and her hair is so wild that she has to wear a special head ornament to keep it at bay. Alongside details of her appearance, this early text also tells us what kind of power Shiwang W wields, and it's by no means insignificant. She controls what is known as the grindstone and the 5 shards constellations of the heavens, which means effectively she controls the apparatus that creates the universe. She also has control over what are known as the catastrophes of the sky and the 5 destructive forces, which means she can induce and control floods, famine, plagues, and other natural disasters. That being said, she's not all bad. She can also avert said disasters and cure all diseases. She is described as being fond of and skilled at making a sound known as the xiao, which is yet to be properly translated into English. It can be interpreted as meaning to whistle, to roar, or to scream, and essentially describes a sort of ethereal sound that could convey more meaning than actual words could, which sounds really cool. It had the power to rouse the winds and also summon spirits. Shamans and sages were also said to be capable of making it, and it was historically compared to the cry of a phoenix, a long sigh, and also the notes of a zither. In an ancient text known as the Songs of Chu, it is even said that the xiao could be used by shamans to bring the dead back to life. In other words, the picture that the classic of Mountain and Seas paints of Shiwang W is one of a formidable deity who is not to be trifled with. In these early depictions, Shiwang W is most closely associated with shamanic practices. She is connected to the tigress, an animal that had a long-standing history within shamanism, and many depictions of her bear a great similarity to the poses and the instruments that would be used by shamans to enter into a trance. She is also attended in these early depictions by 3 birds, which bring her fruit to eat, which are part of her entourage of shamanic emissaries that serve her. From as early as the 4th century BC, however, her reputation began to change as she was gradually incorporated into the Taoist pantheon. Now, for anyone who is curious or who is a painter here, this painting was done by the Qing dynasty artist Xie Wenli and depicts a wildly popular folk deity known as Shiwang W, or the Queen Mother of the West, just here. In his seminal text, the Zhuangzi, the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi mentions Shiwang W and discusses how she obtained the Tao, which represents the first solid historical connection between Shiwang W and Taoism. He describes her as one of the highest and most powerful deities, which meant she had obtained immortality and also boasted a number of magical powers. It was around about this time that Shiwang W also became associated with a mythical place in the west known as the Kunlun Mountains, which is where she sometimes lives. This sacred mountain range is supposed to be inhabited by a number of fantastical beasts, including things like 9-tailed foxes, qilin, which are a type of Chinese unicorn, although they kind of have 2 horns, and also Chinese phoenixes. On this mountain range, she is attended by a group of women known as the Jade Maidens, which again sounds lovely. I want to be called a Jade Maiden, and a group of boys known as the Azure Lads, which also sounds pretty cool. If I have a wedding, I'm going to have Jade Maidens and Azure Lads. I'm not going to have groomsmen and bridesmaids. Sounds way cooler. In this way, she is still closely associated with the shamanic tradition and occupies a rather wild space compared to more traditional deities like the Jade Emperor. In fact, she's often associated with yin and things like dark energy, unknown power or ethereal power, and chaos. From the Han Dynasty, so about 206 BC to 220 AD, the first Chinese golden period in Chinese history, from then onwards, various attempts were made to civilize her appearance and reduce her power, since a feminine figure with such skill was a dangerous influence indeed in a patriarchal society. Her wild hair and her tiger-like features were replaced within the Taoist tradition, with the flowing robes, jeweled headdresses, and elegant movements of a courtly lady. Even within Taoism itself, some philosophers and historians tried to place her in a subordinate position to powerful men. For example, it was said that she offered tribute to Yu the Great, whereas in earlier traditions she was his teacher. And she supposedly attended the court of Laozi, whereas again in ancient history she is his superior, and was even rumored to have written parts of or all of the Tao Te Ching, which is the Taoist holy book that was supposedly written by Laozi. There were numerous attempts to supplant her with male deities, but all failed, as her allure proved to be too great, which I think is pretty awesome, to be honest. She's one of my favorite deities for that reason, because of the girl power. In particular, she enjoyed a substantial boost in popularity from the 2nd century onward, as Han Chinese travelers began to explore other parts of the West. This is evident, for example, in the Mogao Caves, which contain several paintings dating back to the Jin dynasty, so about 265 to 420 AD, of the goddess herself flying through the heavens in order to worship the Buddha. Much like the Jade Emperor, she surged in popularity during the Tang dynasty, when a sect of Taoists known as the Shangqing sect became the official state religion. This particular sect of Taoism focused heavily on the goddess as the highest ranking deity in the pantheon, unlike other sects where it would be the Jade Emperor. Her increased visibility meant that she became a popular subject of Tang poetry, which further boosted her notoriety among the common people. Although again, many literati attempted to portray her as a subservient woman, she became a popular and potent symbol of feminine power for the numerous Tang women who were no longer content with the status quo. She became the ultimate symbol of yin, and during this time, she also became closely associated with her role controlling immortality and the afterlife, so wielding this incredible power, even over other deities. Although it's not entirely clear when the peach tree became part of her mythology, it remains to this day one of the most important symbols of her power. The peaches of this tree will endow anyone who eats them with immortality. Sounds pretty great. With its long roots and tall branches, this peach tree also connects the realm of the heavens with the realm of earth, which allows Shiwang W to communicate directly with human beings, something that most deities are unable to do. Of course, she wouldn't speak to just any old person, but there are a number of documented cases of her conversing with, of course, emperors, either to let them know that they had the mandate of heaven or to teach them her secrets of immortality. For example, during the Zhou dynasty, King Wu set out on a trip to the western regions and ended up encountering Shiwang W in the process. According to some accounts, they even had a raucous love affair, although the main thrust of the story is that he studies under her in an attempt to gain the secrets of immortality. Spoiler alert, he doesn't manage to figure them out, and he dies like any other mortal man. And on that note, we'll move on to our 5-minute break. So let's all take, I just love this, Donald Duck, the coolest Chinese god. Great. So we'll take 5 minutes to appreciate one of the less known deities in the Chinese pantheon, Donald Duck. And then we'll jump in. So during the second half, I want to talk about a few of the other popular deities within the Chinese canon. Let me just double check the chat to make sure. Also watch The Forbidden Kingdom for the Peach Tree and the Monkey King. Yes. So during the second half, I'm going to be talking about a few of the other popular deities within the Chinese canon, starting with one that I feel is emblematic of the kind of permeable nature of religion in China. Now, this here is a wooden statue of the Chinese goddess Guan Yin, which was sculpted during the Song dynasty, so again, 960 to 1279. Guan Yin is the Chinese name for the Buddhist deity Avalokitesvara, with the Chinese name literally translating to mean to hear cries. Guan, to hear, like an old version of that word. Yin, which now means sound, but could mean cries in traditional classical Chinese. What makes Guan Yin distinct, however, from the typical Indian Buddhist depiction of Avalokitesvara is that sometime during the Song dynasty, they went through a gender change. Prior to the Song dynasty, all depictions of this bodhisattva were masculine in appearance, since Avalokitesvara in the Indian tradition is a male deity. It was only from the 10th century onward the images of the deity depicted as female as well as male began to appear. Now, this was based on accounts from the Lotus Sutra, which contains the earliest known mention of Avalokitesvara. In the Sutra, the entire 25th chapter of the Lotus Sutra is dedicated to Avalokitesvara and of desperate beings. Works ceaselessly to help anyone who calls upon him, which is where from. What is most important when talking about Guan Yin, however, is the fact that the Lotus Sutra mentions that Avalokitesvara has the power to shapeshift to look like any human or non-human being, including other gods and major figures on Earth like kings, for example. The reason why Avalokitesvara changes their appearance in the Lotus Sutra is to make them more amenable to whoever they're trying to help or convert. In fact, within this one chapter alone, a total of 33 different manifestations of Avalokitesvara are described, of which 7 are female. This particular chapter in the Lotus Sutra began to garner popularity in China from as early as the Sui dynasty, so around about the 6th century, and was circulated throughout most of the country during the Tang dynasty, when the Silk Road reached its peak and Buddhist texts could be easily disseminated throughout the country due to the development of print technology. Change was not resisted by Indian Buddhist practitioners within China, since Guan Yin's gender didn't actually matter. And Mahayana Buddhism follows the belief that the ultimate reality is emptiness, so your gender really doesn't matter anyway. But why were Chinese people more amenable to the female version of Avalokitesvara? And what was it about this particular deity, among other ones in Buddhism, that made them so popular? So here is a statue of Guan Yin that currently sits atop Mount Putuo in Zhejiang province, which serves as pretty solid evidence of her towering importance within the country today. There were 2 very good reasons why Chinese people were attracted to Guan Yin, and why many of them believed a feminine image suited her better. You see, within the Lotus Sutra, Avalokitesvara is presented as a bodhisattva whose primary goal is to relieve people of their suffering and to grant people children. This association with compassion, care, parenthood, and fertility meant that in traditional Chinese culture, they were aligned with distinctly yin or feminine values. It seemed only natural to transform Avalokitesvara from an effeminate-looking male deity into a completely female mother goddess, as was sort of in keeping with more Chinese traditions. By the 12th century, this female version of Avalokitesvara had totally supplanted any male depictions, and she was sometimes even shown holding an infant, to further stress the important connection between the bodhisattva and motherhood. Nowadays, she is most often portrayed as a beautiful flowing robes and wearing lavish necklaces that would have been worn by either Indian or Chinese royalty. In her left hand, she holds a jar that contains holy water, and in her right hand, she holds a willow branch, not in this depiction, but in most others. On her crown, which you can actually see here very, very faintly, just here, there will almost always be an image of the Amitabha Buddha, who is the principal Buddha of the Pure Land sect. So you can see the tiny little Buddha just up here in her crown. There are some localized versions of her appearance, however, which demonstrate how her attributes have been reinterpreted over time. For example, in Fujian province, she is often shown wearing Tang Dynasty style hanfu and carrying a fishing basket, because, of course, Fujian province is a coastal region, and Guan Yin was often prayed to by fishermen who were keen to gain her protection on their long and dangerous seafaring voyages. Within Chinese art, there are also a few set motifs that involve Guan Yin. In most Chinese paintings, she's either depicted alone, standing on top of a dragon, accompanied by a colorful bird of some sort, or flanked by two children. You can see variations on all of the standard depictions here. Although in the final one, there is only one child in the painting rather than two. I don't know where they lost the other one. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one who painted each individual paint. I wasn't able to find out, who painted each of these individual paintings, but I've included the website I got all of these paintings from in the pack that I will send out after this seminar. They were all painted as part of a painting competition that was held by the Water Dragon Studio, which is near to the China Academy of Art in Hangzhou. The theme for the year of 2019 was Avalokitesvara, so there was a mixture of male and female depictions, of which I've picked a lot of female depictions. The two children that Guan Yin is often shown with are her acolytes, who met her while she was meditating on Mount Putuo. So the girl is called Longnu, or Dragon Girl, and the boy is known as Shancai, or Good Fortune. In some paintings, however, these two children are replaced with the Chinese military general Guan Yu and the bodhisattva Skanda. As in the case with many popular deities, Guan Yin has surpassed the confines of being simply a Buddhist bodhisattva and is now worshipped throughout China within both Chinese folk religion and even within Taoism. You even go to some Taoist temples and you will see her there. In this capacity, rather than being called a bodhisattva, which is, of course, a Buddhist term, she's often referred to as the goddess of mercy and compassion. Most Buddhists are amenable to this situation, since they believe it is emblematic of Avalokitesvara's widespread appeal and beneficence. This is also very much in keeping with her role as a sort of savior bodhisattva, as it is believed that within the Buddhist pantheon, she is one of a handful of deities who can rescue anyone and help them achieve enlightenment, even those that are deep in negative karma. Now, there are numerous folktales and religious stories that revolve around Guan Yin, but I won't go into them here because I'd like to use the time to talk about a couple of other lesser known but no less important deities within the Chinese pantheon, and I hope you'll enjoy them all. So this here is a painting by the artist Lu Xinzhong, who was active during the late Song dynasty and early Yuan dynasties. It depicts a folk deity known as Yanluo Wang, or King Yanluo, who I'm sure you may recognize from some of our other, if you've been to other seminars, he's cropped up occasionally. He is the legendary ruler of Diyu, the underworld of Chinese mythology and religion. Technically, Yanluo Wang as a deity belongs to Chinese folk religion and to Taoism, but he is often equated with his Buddhist counterpart Yama. Alongside ruling over the underworld, Yanluo Wang is the one who ultimately passes judgment on the souls that pass through it. He is always portrayed as a male deity and is frequently depicted with two attendants, such as the ones that you see just here. One of them holds a brush. These are the two attendants. So one of them holds a brush in his hands, and the other one holds a book that lists every soul in the underworld and the predetermined death dates of every person on Earth. So kind of like a dark sort of book, I suppose. Alongside these two attendants, Yanluo Wang, these are the ones I was pointing to here, has help from two guardians of hell, known as Oxhead and Horseface, which I love. Oxhead sounds kind of cool, but Horseface always sounds really funny to me. I'm not kidding. Their Chinese names are Niu Tou, which means oxhead, and Ma Lian, which do literally translate to mean, as I said, oxhead and horseface. As you may have guessed, Oxhead is a demon with the body of a man and the head of a bull, while Horseface has the body of a man and the face of a horse, or head of a horse. Believe it or not, these are the two friendly faces that a dead soul is met with after first entering the underworld, and they are the ones tasked with leading the souls to the court of Yanluo Wang. According to some legends, however, it is actually Oxhead and Horseface's responsibility to escort newly dead souls into the underworld itself. In their spare time, they also act as messengers for Yanluo Wang. Although the backstory of Horseface is tragically unknown, don't know why he has a horse's face, it was said that Oxhead was once the soul of a newly dead ox that had worked hard his entire life. Yanluo Wang took pity on him and decided to transform him into Oxhead, after which time he became Yanluo Wang's faithful servant. So imagine that you've worked your whole life and then you finally die and then you get put back to work. That's actually not that compassionate at all. When souls arrive into the underworld, Oxhead and Horseface present them to Yanluo Wang one by one, and he makes a judgment on them based on how they lived their lives, according to the book that he has. Men or women of merit who did good deeds or lived moral lives will be rewarded with a good reincarnation, or might possibly even be revived into their previous life, typically if they died young. Those who committed misdeeds, however, will be sentenced to torture within the underworld, followed by a poor reincarnation. So one of the greatest descriptions I've ever heard in a Chinese classical story of the reincarnation is that Yanluo Wang has this kind of like hanger full of different clothes, but they're actually different skins of different animals. And he sends the people who are getting a poor reincarnation over there, and they have to kind of put on like a sheep outfit or a cow outfit, and then they become the animal as they move in back up to Earth, which I think is really cool. It is important to note, however, that Yanluo Wang isn't the only one ruling the roost in hell. The concept of the underworld has gone through various revisions throughout Chinese history. Originally, there were two competing ideas for how hell was structured. So some people believe there were 136 hells, with 8 large hells being each subdivided into 16 smaller ones. Sounds great. Others believe that there were only 18 hells, with each one being led by a subordinate king to Yanluo Wang. During the Tang Dynasty, however, both of these prevailing theories were challenged and then supplanted. So here we have another painting by Lu Xinzhong, as both paintings are part of a set based around a popular theme known as the 10 Kings of Hell, or the Shi Wang, Shi meaning 10, Wang meaning kings. This new concept of how the underworld worked had been heavily influenced by Taoist thought and posited that Yanluo Wang was actually only the 5th king, with the underworld being governed by 10 kings that each ruled over their own mini hell and had a specific task. So a lot of delegation going on in hell. So the other 9 kings are known as Qinguang Wang, Qujiang Wang, Songdi Wang, Wuguang Wang, Biancheng Wang, Taishan Wang, Pingdeng Wang, Dushi Wang, and Zhuanlun Wang. Yanluo is undoubtedly the most famous of the 10 and is one of the only ones who continues to be found on iconography to this day. So he's the only one that continues to be worshipped. You'll see him sometimes if you were in our seminar on the Qingming Festival, or also funeral rites in China. I did sort of 2 separate ones. He appears quite a lot on banknotes that they are burnt in honor of your ancestors. So instead of Mao Zedong, he kind of takes the place on those like hell notes, they're called. In fact, during the Song Dynasty, these 10 kings would be replaced yet again, this time by a magistrate named Bao Zheng, who is tasked with judging the dead and is accompanied by his 3 assistants, who are aptly named old age, illness, and the last one just death. By now, I'm sure you're all very curious. What exactly were the jobs of these 10 kings of hell? What kind of job do you have? What kind of like benefits do you get? What's your pension package like? The first king, Qinguang Wang, actually takes over the role of Yanluo, as he receives the newly dead souls and decides whether or not they need to be punished. If the answer is yes, he ships them off to whichever region will best suit them in terms of the punishment. According to folk legend, the reason why Yanluo lost this position was because he was too lenient, so he got demoted to the 5th court of hell. The second king, Chujiang, is responsible for punishing dishonest middlemen, fraudsters, and ignorant doctors. The third king, Songdi, rules over the court of immoral scholars, forgers, slanderers, and shrews, which sounds a bit targeted, if I'm going to be honest. The fourth king, Wu Guan, punishes misers, dishonest merchants, and this is a really long one, those who knew about a solution or cure but chose not to tell anyone about it. Yen Luo, the newly demoted fifth king, is now tasked with punishing religious sinners, murderers, hunters, fishers, and those who were too lascivious in life. You can see him in the painting here in his new role, punishing all of those naughty souls. The sixth king, Bian Cheng, is solely responsible for those who committed sacrilege. Taishan, the seventh king, takes care of grave robbers or anyone else who violated a grave, along with cannibals and sellers of human flesh, a surprisingly common problem during famines, I've put as a note to myself. Horrifying. The eighth king, Du Shi, is again only responsible for one group, as he punishes those that are lacking in filial piety, very serious sin back then. The ninth king, Ping Deng, is in charge of punishing arsonists, abortionists, and his abortionists, not abolitionists, abortionists and artists, both painters and writers, who were a bit too smutty, which feels a little bit intense, to be honest. He also, however, presides over a separate city for the souls of anyone who died by an accident, including suicides, since they cannot be reborn unless they can find another accident victim to take their place. It's kind of like a one in, one out rolling door policy. The 10th and final king, Zhuan Lun, turns the wheel of reincarnation that carries the dead up to their new lives, either as gods, human beings on earth, good or bad demons, or possibly even animals if you really messed up. To this day, you can still find representations of the kings and the tortures they provide in their various courts throughout temples in China, particularly if you go to city god temples. And they're always really great. They're always like incredibly graphic, kind of like you see people boiling in pots or being cut in half, very kind of Dante's Inferno-esque. And on that lovely note, we'll get to our final discussion. So if you have any questions, I will allow people to unmute in a second or start writing in the chat. And if you do need to leave now, please do feel free. You don't have to stick around for the Q&A discussion part. But I want to ask everyone here, in terms of structure, the Chinese conceptions of heaven and hell are not vastly different from our Western or Christian ones. In fact, when I read about the 10 levels of hell, it reminded me a lot of Dante's Inferno and the way that hell is structured in Christian tradition. So what do you think was so universally appealing about the idea of an afterlife that was structured in levels depending on how good or bad you were? And for now, I'm going to allow everyone... Oh, no.